The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into my wrists as the transport van jolted over another pothole. Through the tiny mesh-covered window, I could see the prison walls looming ahead, gray concrete stretching upward, topped with coils of razor wire that glinted in the afternoon sun. I was 18 years old, and this was to be my home for the next 3 years. My name is Elena Mercer. 3 months ago, I was a high school senior, with college applications spread across my bedroom floor. Now I was prisoner, bar 87291, convicted of a crime that began as a stupid mistake and spiraled into something I couldn't control. They said I was an accessory. They said I should have known better. Maybe they were right. The van passed through 2 security checkpoints before pulling into an enclosed garage. The door rolled shut behind us with a metallic clang that echoed through my bones. A heaviness settled in my chest, the reality that I was truly trapped. "Out!" barked the transport officer, a stocky woman with a permanent scowl. "Face the wall, feet apart." I complied, my legs trembling so badly I feared they might give way. The handcuffs were removed only to be replaced by a different set attached to a chain around my waist, a second chain connected to shackles around my ankles. The rattling sound followed me as I shuffled into the processing area. Processing was a blur of humiliation. Strip search, delousing shower, standing naked while a female officer inspected every part of my body. Medical intake where a nurse asked invasive questions while barely looking at me. Fingerprinting, photos, forms to sign. A stack of prison-issue belongings, 2 beige uniforms, underwear, socks, slip-on canvas shoes, a thin blanket, sheets, towel, and a transparent plastic tote, containing basic hygiene items. "Mercer, listen up," said the intake officer, a tall woman with short-cropped hair and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "You're in General Population B Block, Cell 217. You've got 1 cellmate. Meals are at 600, 1200, and 1800 hours. Commissary privileges start next week if your account is funded. Any questions?" I had 1,000 questions, but my throat was too dry to speak. I simply shook my head. "Good. Remember the rules. Respect staff, follow orders immediately, keep your area clean, no contraband. Break the rules, you face consequences. Understand?" "Yes," I managed to whisper. "Yes. What?" "Yes, officer," I corrected myself, recalling the orientation video they'd shown us. The walk to B Block felt like a march through a foreign planet. Everything echoed: footsteps, voices, the metallic clang of doors. Other inmates stared as I passed, assessing me with hard eyes. I kept mine fixed on the floor. Block was a 2-tier arrangement of cells surrounding a common area with metal tables bolted to the floor. Most cells held 2 inmates, their limited personal possessions visible through the barred doors. As we approached cell 217, I saw a woman in her 30s lying on the bottom bunk, reading a dog-eared paperback. "Torres," called the escorting officer, "got your new cellie. Show her the ropes." Torres glanced up, her expression unreadable. She had intricate tattoos covering both arms and dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Without a word, she returned to her book. The cell door slid shut behind me with a heavy thud and click of the lock engaging. The space was approximately 8 by 10 feet, smaller than my childhood bedroom's walk-in closet. 2 narrow bunks, a stainless steel toilet sink combo unit with no privacy, a small metal desk and stool bolted to the wall, and 2 lockboxes for personal items. The walls were bare concrete, covered in small scratches and markings from previous occupants. "Top bunk's yours," Torres said without looking up. "Don't touch my stuff, don't snore, and we'll get along fine." I placed my items on the thin mattress of the top bunk, trying to control the trembling in my hands. The reality of my situation hit me like a physical blow. This tiny cell would be my world for years to come. No privacy, no comfort, no escape. That first night I didn't sleep. The mattress was thin and lumpy, the pillow barely deserving of the name. The lights in the corridor stayed dimly lit, and strange noises echoed throughout the night. Sobbing, occasional shouts, the constant mechanical sounds of doors and locks. At 5:30 a.m., a harsh buzzer jolted through the block. Torres was already up, brushing her teeth at the small sink. "Better move," she advised, spitting into the sink. "Last one to breakfast gets the cold food." Breakfast was served in a cavernous cafeteria that smelled of industrial cleaners and overcooked eggs. I received a tray of unidentifiable eggs, a slice of toast, and a carton of milk. Finding an empty seat, I sat alone, painfully aware of the social dynamics playing out around me. Inmates clustered in obvious groups, some by race, others seemingly by age or background. "Fresh meat sitting all alone," came a voice as a tray clattered down opposite mine. A heavy-set woman with close-cropped hair and a scar along her jawline smiled at me, though it didn't reach her eyes. 2 other women flanked her. "What's your name, princess?" "Elena," I mumbled, keeping my eyes down. "Elena," she mimicked in a high-pitched voice. "I'm Dawson. These are my friends. We look out for new girls like you. Prison can be dangerous without friends." The threat behind her offer of friendship was clear even to me. "Thank you, but I'm okay," I said quietly. Dawson's smile vanished. "Stuck-up bitch, huh? Think you're better than us?" She leaned forward. "Nobody's better than anybody in here, princess. We're all just animals in cages." Before things could escalate, a guard approached. "Problem here, Dawson?" "No problem, Officer Reyes," Dawson replied, suddenly pleasant. "Just welcoming our new neighbor." As they walked away, Dawson glanced back with a look that promised our conversation wasn't over. I pushed my tray away, appetite gone. Looking around the cafeteria, I caught Torres watching me from another table. She gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head, a warning I didn't yet understand, but would soon learn to recognize. By the end of my first week, I had learned there were 2 distinct sets of rules in prison. The official ones posted on mobile, laminated sheets throughout the facility, and the unwritten ones that actually governed daily life. Breaking the former resulted in disciplinary reports and loss of privileges. Breaking the latter could cost much more. Rule 1. Find your place. The prison social hierarchy was complex and rigid. There were leaders and followers, predators and prey. The weak were exploited mercilessly. I wasn't sure where I fit, but I knew I needed to project enough strength to avoid becoming a target. Rule 2. Mind your business. Curiosity could be dangerous. Witnessing something you shouldn't could put you in an impossible position. Report it and be labeled a snitch, a virtual death sentence. Or stay silent and risk becoming an accessory. Rule 3. Choose your associations carefully. Your cellmate, your work assignment partners, the people you sat with at meals. These connections defined you in the eyes of others. Torres, I discovered, was serving 7 years for armed robbery. She wasn't friendly, but she was fair, and her reputation as someone not to be messed with provided a buffer of protection. "You need to toughen up," Torres told me on my 5th night, after I'd returned from the showers with fresh bruises courtesy of Dawson and her friends. "They'll keep coming after you if they think you're easy prey." "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, wincing as I touched my ribs. "I can't fight them." "You don't have to win a fight," Torres explained. "You just have to make it costly enough that they'll look for easier targets. But that's only part of it." She studied me critically. "You walk around looking scared all the time. Stop that. Walk like you belong here, like nothing surprises you." I tried to follow her advice. The next morning, I stood straighter in the breakfast line, kept my expression neutral instead of fearful, and chose a seat at a table with other younger inmates, rather than sitting alone. Small changes, but they mattered. By week 2, I was assigned to work in the laundry, hot, monotonous work, folding endless stacks of identical beige uniforms, but better than kitchen duty, which I'd heard was the worst. Assignment for new inmates. In the laundry, I met Samira, a 22-year-old serving 18 months for fraud. She had a gentle demeanor that seemed out of place in our surroundings, and a quiet intelligence that manifested in her careful observation of everything around her. First rule of survival, Samira told me as we folded sheets side by side, is to be useful without being exploited. Find something you can offer that others value. Like what? I asked. I don't have anything. Everyone has something. You're educated, right? Help people write letters to their kids or file appeals, or use your commissary to trade for protection. Just be smart about it. Through Samira, I met others who occupied the middle ground of prison society, neither predators nor prey. Women who were serving their time quietly, focusing on education programs or vocational training, maintaining connections with family, on the outside, building small comforts within the confines of their restricted lives. But Dawson hadn't forgotten me. 2 weeks after my arrival, she cornered me in the recreation yard. "Thought you could just ignore me, princess?" she growled, backing me against the fence. Her breath smelled of cigarettes, contraband that somehow made its way into the facility, despite regular searches. "I'm not looking for trouble," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Should have thought about that before you disrespected me." She pressed closer. "You owe me, and I'm collecting. Starting tomorrow, you're holding something for me." I knew what she meant. Contraband. If caught, it would mean solitary confinement, loss of good behavior credits, maybe additional charges. "I can't," I said, fear making my voice waver. "You don't get to say no," Dawson hissed, gripping my arm hard enough to leave marks. "Unless you want an accident to happen. Stairs can be so dangerous." A shadow fell across us. Torres stood there, arms crossed. "Problem?" she asked. Dawson's grip loosened slightly. "Just having a chat with your cellie." "Chat's over," Torres said, flatly. "Move along." To my surprise, Dawson stepped back. There was history between them that I didn't understand, some power dynamic that worked in Torres's favor. "This isn't finished," Dawson promised me before walking away. "Why did you help?" "Me?" I asked Torres as we made our way back inside. "Don't read too much into it," she replied. "I just don't need the headache of a new cellmate if you end up in the infirmary." That night, huddled under my thin blanket, I pressed my face into the pillow to muffle my sobs. I missed my family desperately. My mother's voice, my little brother's laugh. I hadn't spoken to them since my sentencing. My father had made it clear he considered me dead to him the moment I was convicted. The next morning, a guard called my name during count. "Mercer, you've got a visitor." The visitation room was divided by a thick glass barrier, with phones on either side for communication. My heart raced as I was led to a booth, wondering who had come. My mother sat on the other side, looking older. Then I remembered. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands clutching her purse with white knuckles. "Elena," she said, her voice cracking as she picked up the phone. "Mom." The single word carried all my grief and shame. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then the words tumbled out, her assurances that she was working with a new lawyer to appeal my sentence, updates about my brother, careful avoidance of any mention of my father. "Are you safe?" she finally asked, the question she'd clearly been, holding back. "I'm okay," I lied, not wanting to add to her worries. "It's not that bad." Another lie. "I brought money for your commissary account," she said. "You can buy some extra food, maybe some books." The 20-minute visit ended too quickly. As I was escorted back to my unit, I felt both comforted and devastated. The glimpse of my old life made the reality of my current one even more painful. That afternoon, I received notification that $100 had been added to my commissary account. It wasn't much by outside standards, but in prison, it represented power, the ability to supplement the meager prison diet, purchase basic comfort items, even create small luxuries through trades with other inmates. "You've got choices now," Torres observed when I showed her the slip. "Word of advice: spend some, save some. Don't flash it around, but don't hoard it all either. Buy some coffee and share it. Makes you look like someone with connections." I followed her advice, carefully selecting items from the commissary list: shampoo that didn't leave my hair feeling like straw, decent soap, a few snacks, instant coffee packets. When the items arrived, I offered Torres a coffee packet as thanks for her help. "Smart," she said, accepting it with a nod. "You're learning." That small exchange marked a turning point. Not friendship, exactly, but an alliance. In prison, that distinction could mean everything. By my 3rd week, I had established a fragile routine. Wake at 5:30 a.m., breakfast at 6 gar, work assignment from 8 gauns to 11:30, lunch at noon, educational programs or yard time in the afternoon, dinner at 6 gao, lockdown at 9 uwan. The monotony was punctuated only by the constant vigilance required to navigate the social minefield around me. I had become part of a loose network centered around Samira from the laundry. Our group wasn't a gang in the traditional sense, more a mutual protection arrangement. We sat together at meals, shared commissary items, and watched each other's backs. There was Zoe, a former nursing student serving time for prescription fraud; Denise, a grandmother in for tax evasion; and Lucinda, barely older than me, convicted of possession with intent to distribute. One evening in the common area, Zoe slid onto the bench beside me. "Heard you used to be good at school," she said quietly. "Think you could help me with something?" She was enrolled in a GED program but struggling with the math portion. I agreed to help her during free periods, using precious notebook paper to work through practice problems. When word spread that I was tutoring, others approached me, some genuinely wanting help, others seeing it as an opportunity to establish a connection that might be useful later. I began trading my tutoring services for small favors and items, an extra dessert at dinner, a borrowed book, protection during shower time when I was at my most vulnerable. It wasn't explicit, nothing so crude as direct payment, but the understanding was clear. Torres watched my integration into the prison economy with something like approval. "Not bad," she said one night as we prepared for lights out. "You're making yourself valuable without making yourself a target." My mother visited again, this time bringing my 16-year-old brother, Alex. The sight of him, taller than I remembered, trying so hard to be strong, nearly broke me. He talked about school, his friends, everything but the elephant in the room, my absence from his life. "I miss you," he finally said, his voice cracking. "I miss you too," I replied, pressing my palm against the glass. "But I'll be home before you know it." Another lie. 3 years stretched before me like an eternity. After they left, I returned, to find my cell had been searched, standard procedure during visitation times. My few possessions were scattered across my bunk, but nothing was missing. I hadn't accumulated enough to be worth stealing. That night, a fight broke out in the common area between 2 inmates from rival groups. The guards responded with immediate lockdown, confining everyone to their cells while they investigated. Through the narrow window in our door, I could see officers escorting several women away in handcuffs. "What happens to them?" I asked Torres. "Solitary," she replied matter-of-factly. "The whole. No contact, minimal privileges, 23 hours a day in a cell smaller than this one." The thought made me shudder. As restrictive as general population was, solitary confinement sounded like a special kind of hell. The following day, tensions remained high. Groups clustered together at meals, voices hushed, eyes watchful. Rumors circulated that the fight had been over control of contraband distribution, a lucrative enterprise that involved smuggling in cigarettes, drugs, and other prohibited items through various means, including corrupt staff members. During yard time, Samira pulled me aside. "Be careful the next few days," she warned. "Dawson's crew is looking for a scapegoat after last night's bust. Your name came up." "Why me?" I asked, fear clenching my stomach. "Because you're connected to Torres, and Torres used to run with Keller before they had a falling out. It's complicated." Indeed it was. The prison's social web was intricate and constantly shifting. Alliances formed and dissolved based on factors I was only beginning to understand. Shared history on the outside, racial divisions, protection needs, access to resources. That afternoon, as I was returning from the laundry, 2 of Dawson's associates cornered me in a blind spot between security cameras. One held my arms while the other searched me roughly. "What are you doing?" I gasped, struggling against their grip. "Making sure you're not wearing a wire," hissed the one searching me. "Dawson wants to talk." They escorted me to a secluded corner of the recreation area where Dawson waited, smoking a cigarette. "Here's the situation, Princess," she said, blowing smoke in my face. "Someone's been talking to the guards about our business operations. Right after you started getting cozy with Torres and her friends. Interesting timing." "I haven't said anything to anyone," I protested. Maybe not. "But you're going to do something for me to prove your loyalty. Tonight, during dinner, there's going to be a distraction. You're going to deliver a package to the kitchen storage room." My pulse raced. "I can't." "You can, and you will." Dawson cut me off. "Unless you want your pretty face rearranged. Or maybe we pay a visit to that cellmate you're so tight with." The threat to Torres was what clinched it. Not because I cared about her personally, but because without her protection, I would be completely vulnerable. "What would I have to do?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. Dawson smiled. "Smart girl. I'll have the package ready before dinner. All you have to do is walk it to the storage room and leave it behind the big flour container. 2 minutes, tops." As they left me there, shaking, I tried to think through my options. If I refused, I faced a beating at minimum. If I agreed but then backed out, it would be even worse. If I went through with it and got caught, I'd face disciplinary action, maybe additional charges. If I reported the threat to the guards, I'd be labeled a snitch, a virtual death sentence in prison. I decided to talk to Torres. When I returned to our cell and explained the situation, she cursed under her breath. "Dawson's setting you up," she said flatly. "Security's been tightened since the fight. They're watching the kitchen area especially close. You'd get caught for sure." "What should I do?" I asked desperately. Torres was quiet for a long moment. "I might be able to arrange something," she finally said. "But you'll owe me." "Anything," I promised, too frightened to consider the implications. "I need to make some contacts. Stay in the cell until dinner. Don't talk to anyone else about this." Torres left, and I sat on my bunk, knees drawn to my chest, fighting panic. Hours later, she returned just before the dinner call. "Listen carefully," she said in a low voice. "At dinner, Dawson will approach you with the package. Take it. You don't have a choice there. But instead of going to the kitchen storage room, go to the bathroom near the east corridor. Second stall from the left. Leave the package under the sink and walk out. Don't run. Don't act suspicious. What happens then? Not your concern. Just do exactly as I said, then return to the cafeteria and sit with Samira's group like nothing happened." When Dawson slipped the small package into my pocket during the dinner line, it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My heart hammered as I made my way, not to the kitchen, but to the designated bathroom. The facility seemed hyper-aware of my movements, though logically, I knew no one was paying special attention. The bathroom was empty when I entered. I quickly placed the package where Torres had instructed and returned to the cafeteria, blood roaring in my ears. I half expected alarms to sound, guards to surround me, but nothing happened. I ate dinner with Samira and the others, barely tasting the food. Later that night, as the block settled into uneasy quiet, Torres finally explained. The package was intercepted by someone who owed me a favor. By now it's made its way to where it was actually supposed to go, but through channels that can't be traced back to you. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet, Torres replied grimly. This buys you time, but it doesn't solve your problem. Dawson's going to keep coming after you unless something changes the equation. What can I do? You need protection beyond what I can provide. Tomorrow, you're going to request to speak with Counselor Martinez about joining the GED instruction program as a peer tutor. It gets you limited access to the education wing, away from general population for a few hours each day. It also puts you under the direct supervision of civilian staff. The plan was clever. Create a legitimate reason for me to be removed from Dawson's sphere of influence during vulnerable periods. Establish value to the administration that would make them pay attention if anything happened to me, and build connections with staff who might offer subtle protection. The next morning, I submitted the request form. 3 days later, after a brief interview where I demonstrated my educational background, I was approved as a peer tutor in the GED program, a coveted position typically reserved for inmates with longer records of good behavior. My first day in the education wing felt like stepping into a different world. The classrooms were bright and clean. The civilian instructors treated inmates with respect rather than suspicion, and for those few hours I could almost forget where I was. 1 month into my sentence, I no longer felt like the terrified girl who had arrived in handcuffs and shackles. The prison was still a harsh, unforgiving place, but I had learned its rhythms and rules. More importantly, I had found ways to carve out small spaces of meaning within its confines. My work in the education program became my sanctuary. 3 mornings a week, I helped other inmates prepare for their GED exams, explaining algebra concepts, reviewing grammar rules, offering encouragement to women who had often been told their entire lives that they were stupid or worthless. Many were studying not for themselves, but for their children, wanting to set an example, to have something to share in their letters home. My daughter's in 8th grade now, explained Raquel, a 35-year-old working through a practice essay. She asks me questions about her homework sometimes. Before, I'd have to make excuses. Now I can actually help her. These moments of connection, of purpose, sustained me through the bleaker aspects of incarceration. The constant noise, the lack of privacy, the petty humiliations, the loneliness that persisted even when surrounded by others. Torres and I had settled into an uneasy alliance. We weren't friends, she made that clear, but we had developed a mutual respect. She continued to offer guidance on navigating prison politics, and I shared commissary items and helped with letters to her teenage son. Why are you helping me? I finally asked her one night. You could have let Dawson's setup play out. Torres was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. You remind me of someone, she eventually said. My sister was about your age when she started using. Pretty smart girl with her whole life ahead of her. One bad decision led to another. She died of an overdose 4 years ago. She didn't elaborate further, and I didn't press. It was the most personal information she had ever shared. The situation with Dawson remained tense but manageable. My new position in the education program, combined with Torres' protection and my growing network of allies, created enough barriers that direct confrontation had become too costly for her. Still, I knew better than to let my guard down. Prison grudges could simmer for months before exploding into violence. My mother and brother visited regularly now, every other Sunday. These visits became anchors in the endless sea of identical days. I lived for the updates about home, about Alex's college applications, about the appeal my mother continued to pursue despite the legal costs draining her savings. 6 weeks into my sentence, I received a letter from my father, the first contact since my arrest. The envelope sat unopened on my bunk for hours as I tried to prepare myself for whatever it might contain. When I finally read it, the single page held just 3 sentences. Your mother tells me you're pursuing education opportunities there. That's something at least. Take care of yourself. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but an acknowledgement. A crack in the wall of his rejection. I read it a dozen times until the words blurred through my tears. That same week, a new inmate arrived in our block, Eliza, a 20-year-old first-time offender like me, sentenced to 18 months for her role in a credit card scam. I recognized the shell-shocked expression on her face, the way she hunched her shoulders as if trying to disappear, the barely contained terror. You should talk to her, Torres suggested, nodding toward where Eliza sat alone at dinner. She's going to get eaten alive otherwise. Why me? I asked. Because you remember what it was like, and because you've learned enough to help without endangering yourself. I approached Eliza cautiously, sitting across from her with a neutral greeting. Her eyes widened with suspicious fear. I'm not going to hurt you, I said quietly. I just thought you might want some company. I remember my first week here. It helps to know you're not alone. Slowly, haltingly, we talked. I offered the same practical advice Torres had given me. Walk confidently, find useful skills to trade, choose associations carefully, respect the unwritten rules. By the end of the meal, some of the blind panic had faded from her eyes. Thank you, she whispered as we returned our trays. Just pass it on someday, I replied. That night, lying on my thin mattress, listening to the familiar symphony of prison sounds, coughing, muffled conversations, the occasional sob, guards' footsteps during hourly checks, I realized something had shifted within me. The constant fear that had been my companion since arrival had receded, replaced by a stubborn determination. I would survive this place. Not just endure it, but find ways to use the time productively. I would take advantage of every educational opportunity, build a record of good behavior that would support early release, maintain my outside connections so I would have somewhere to return to when this was over. The following morning, I went to the counselor's office and requested information about college correspondence courses available to inmates. The process would be complicated. Limited course selections, financial challenges, logistical hurdles, but not impossible. It won't be easy, Counselor Martinez warned me. The system isn't designed to make this straightforward. Nothing about, this place is easy, I replied. But I have time. Might as well use it. Time, the currency of prison. Days marked off on makeshift calendars, weeks bleeding into months, sentences measured in birthdays missed, children's milestones unseen, time that could crush you with its weight, or be shaped into something meaningful. 2 months into my sentence, I received notification that I'd been approved for a correspondence course in business management. My mother had somehow found the money for the fees. The thick packet of materials arrived during mail call, drawing curious looks from other inmates. That night, I spread the textbook and assignment sheets across my small desk, tracing the words with my fingers. In that moment, the cell walls seemed to recede slightly. Not freedom, I was still very much a prisoner, but a window to something beyond, a reminder that this sentence had an end date, that there would be a after. Planning for the future? Torres asked, observing me from her bunk. Trying to, I admitted. Does that seem naive? She considered this. Naive would be thinking this place can't change you. It will, but you get some say in how. She gestured toward my course materials. That's you having a say. 3 months after my arrival, I stood in the recreation yard watching new inmates being escorted to their housing units, seeing in their posture and expressions the same fear and disorientation I had felt that first day. One young woman caught my eye briefly as she passed, her face tear-streaked, her steps faltering. In that moment, I understood that I was no longer the same person who had entered this place. The naive girl in handcuffs had been replaced by someone harder, more cautious, but also more resilient. Someone who had learned to navigate a world defined by power, scarcity, and control. Someone who had discovered her own capacity to adapt and endure. I was still Elena Mercer, still 18 years old with most of my sentence ahead of me. But I was also inmate, number 87291, with a place in the complex ecosystem of the prison, with allies if not friends, with small duties and responsibilities that provided structure to endless days. This duality would be my reality for the remainder of my sentence, one foot in the world I had lost, one in the world I now inhabited. The challenge would be holding on to enough of my former self to have something to return to when this was over, while accepting enough of my current reality to survive it. That evening, as I helped Eliza navigate her first commissary order, explaining the unspoken value system that made certain items worth far more than their listed price, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the common area's shatterproof glass. The face looking back at me was thinner, older, eyes more watchful, jaw set, with determination. Prison was changing me as Torres had said it would. The question that remained, that would define the rest of my sentence, was how much control I could maintain over that transformation. As lockdown approached and inmates drifted back toward their cells, I gathered my few possessions from the common area, the textbook I'd been studying, a letter from home I'd read a dozen times, a crude calendar marking off days served and days remaining. Each night the same routine, each morning the same awakening to the reality of confinement. But tonight, for the first time since my arrival, I felt something like calm as I prepared for lights out. Not happiness. This was still prison, still punishment, still separation from everything I loved. But a quiet recognition that I was finding my way through it, day by day, adapting without surrendering, bending without breaking. 3 years stretched ahead, 195 days of this life. I had survived the first 90. With each one, I was learning that survival wasn't just about physical safety or emotional endurance. It was about finding purpose within limitation, connection, despite barriers, meaning in the midst of loss. Tomorrow would bring another day of routines and restrictions, small challenges and minor victories. I would face it not as the frightened girl who had arrived 3 months ago, but as the person I was becoming, someone who understood that even in prison, especially in prison, every choice mattered, every connection had value. Every day was an opportunity to maintain my humanity in a place designed to diminish it. And someday, when this was over, I would carry these lessons back into the world, hardened but not hardened, changed but not broken, marked by this experience, but not defined by it. For now, though, there was only this cell, this night, this moment of quiet, before another day of serving my time. I closed my eyes, listening to the familiar sounds of the prison settling into its nighttime rhythm, and waited for sleep to come.